Hey Adam, it's Dr. Scott. I have some feedback for you on your Essay 2 draft. Just as a reminder, there were four main criteria for this assignment. The first one is your thesis statement. The thesis statement should be arguable, should be interesting. It should have that subject, claim, and roadmap that I've talked about. Second criteria I'm looking at is your ability to use details from the murals and also from a couple sources, either the Scioto Historical or the documentary we watched, using a couple quotes from those sources to support your thesis statement, your overall claim. Finally, I'm taking a look, or I'm sorry, not finally, but the third criteria is your ability to use, is to organize your thoughts. So you have similar ideas grouped together, and then you also have, more importantly, a good reason why you're going from one idea to another. So you're using transitions, but more importantly, you are placing one paragraph in a location, and it makes, like there's a reason for that location. Fourth criteria is your ability to integrate sources into your paper. And at this point, I don't remember seeing a source, but I do have questions about what's going on in the introduction. I think you're pulling this information from a source, but you're not actually telling us where it comes from. So those are the four criteria. What I've done is I just have some brief notes to myself that are off in the margin, and they're just there to remind me of things to talk to you about. So I'm going to go through your essay, kind of explain what I saw as like the major issues in revise that you'll need to think about as you revise. So I mentioned that there's a lot of information in the paragraph, in the introduction paragraph, that seems like it's coming from a source, but you're not telling us where it's coming from, and that should change in the revision. You should let us know where this information comes from. The thesis statement, which is at the end of the paragraph, I think it more or less covers the main issues that you need for a thesis statement. It doesn't necessarily tell us whether or not you thought that these murals accomplished that goal. And I think more important for me, you give us I think you give us action and color. It seems like these two sentences are your thesis statement. But for me, it's kind of hard to understand what the actual argument is, and I think it's in here that I really got kind of slipped up. Mark in Portsmouth history, only one still has a grip in that mark in history, while the other is slipping to be forgotten. I think you're trying to say that they're saying something about the Spartans mural, that they're emphasizing that, and they're de-emphasizing the Thorpe mural. I think kind of maybe discussing why they're doing that, I think that could be kind of interesting. But right now, I think the thesis statement needs some clarity. I think it needs to be condensed a little bit. Again, I think it's both of these paragraphs, or both of these sentences. But it's going to take some clarity on your part and some focus to get that thesis statement where it needs to be. If you struggle with that, let me know. I can help you out. Overall, though, I thought it was a solid introduction, but that information, that we need to know where that information is coming from, and the thesis statement, I think, could use some work. Because I also think that the body paragraphs, while you are using solid detail in places, it's not always clear what the overall point is. Like, why does it matter that the Jim Thorpe is de-emphasized, but the Spartans mural is, they're really trying to emphasize that? Why does that matter? And that's not really kind of mentioned here. Why is that significant? I think that including that in the thesis statement, and then making sure your body paragraphs are working to support that idea, that's going to get this essay where it needs to be. So in the body paragraph, there's some biographical information about Jim Thorpe, which is not about color, and I would say that this probably needs to get moved to the introduction, or maybe it gets moved to the conclusion, unless the color here, unless this history is relevant to the coloring here, it confused me why I was reading about it in a paragraph that's about color. So again, the introduction might be a good place for it. Might also be good if we're talking about the action, these are things that he actually did, so it might make more sense to put that in the other paragraph. I also wasn't sure to me why you began with this paragraph. If it's like color is the most effective way that they emphasize or de-emphasize something in the murals, that needs to get That needs to be explained. There's not much description here, and what gets kind of confusing, and this is why I think that this biographical information it's not placed where it needs to be. You've got some description here, and then there's a break to get this biographical information, and then we're back to a little bit of description, mentioning that the mural is dark. I think more description needs to be included there. And you're right, like it is a bit darker, and I think it's going to take you kind of describing that darkness in order to pull off the argument a little bit. At the end of the paragraph, so there's this, it's like, so you describe darkness and you contrast it, I believe, yeah, with the Spartans mural. But at the end, like the overall point that you have is that, like, I think this needs more discussion. And I think that kind of gets back to my feedback about the thesis statement. The thesis statement right now doesn't have that much of an argument to it. It just says that they're different. One is emphasized and one's de-emphasized, maybe, but why is that overall? Why is that important? Why does that matter? And so I think figuring that out for the thesis statement is going to give you more to talk about here after your examples. So here at the end of this paragraph, but also maybe here at the end of the Jim Thorpe mural. There are places where I thought the writing was a little bit confusing, and I'm fine with grammatical errors and stuff like that, particularly in a draft. But there were places where it felt like you were saying something important, but it felt kind of confusing when I read it. So like here we have, did Robert Dafford do this on purpose to tell us that the Portsmouth Spartan mural has the spotlight than the Jim Thorpe mural? I think I figure out what you're saying, but it's taken me like 3 or 4 tries to do that. So I think that there's a number of sentences in here that need some clarification and need to the point needs to be much clearer. Semicolon here is used incorrectly. It's not that big of an issue. To the left you've got a sentence. I would say yes, but this would not be a sentence. Because the Portsmouth Spartans can be remembered as the men who made it to the NFL and won, blah, blah, blah. That's not a full sentence. Because is one of those dependent conjunctions. So I think you would just kind of take the semicolon out here. That would fix it up. I think like I've mentioned, at the end of your paragraphs, at the end of your examples, so you'll have an example, there needs to be a bit of explanation, like why this is important. How does this connect to the paper's overall thesis statement? And right now, a thesis statement that just says that they're different, that's not enough. Why are they different? What's significant here? Why de-emphasize Jim Thorpe? Maybe it's an argument that this town emphasizes teamwork more so than they do individual accomplishment. Okay, all right, you might have a case there. There could be another number of other cases that you can make, but there needs to be an overall reason why this is significant. And after your examples, there should be a discussion about how that example relates to that paper's overall argument, its overall thesis statement. And that's the point that I make here as well. Why is that spotlight significant? What are they, what might they be saying about the town? That takes me to our to-do list. Clarifying the thesis statement, what the overall purpose of the paper is about, is important. I think that thesis statement needs to be clear, it needs to be focused, it needs to be down to one sentence. And I do think it needs to hint at what's significant, what's important about this difference that you've noted. The difference is definitely there, you've sold me on that, but why does it matter? That's the part that hasn't been answered yet by the paper. Need more detail in key places. I mentioned a few, I think in both the main body paragraphs it needs to be explained. There needs to be a clear rationale for why you've organized ideas in the way that you have them. And there are places where you need to explain or take your ideas a bit further. Like you're kind of doing some half steps there, and you've got an interesting idea, and I just kind of want to see you run with it a little bit more. I'm happy to help you out with this as you revise. The revision is due Monday the 12th. If you need a little bit more time, I can work with you on that. But I'm looking forward to seeing where this essay goes. Thanks a lot, Adam. I'll talk to you soon.